Rain hammered down on Los Angeles. It was close to 11 at night, and the cold crept through every crack in the abandoned building where Sarah tried to create some kind of shelter. With barely a thin blanket and 2 jackets she'd pulled from a dumpster, she wrapped her kids as best she could. Noah, the youngest, was shaking and sweating at the same time. His body was burning up. Every cough he let out broke her heart. "Hang on, sweetie. Almost there," Sarah murmured, as she stroked his fever-soaked forehead. Tyler, the older one, watched her with big eyes, full of an innocence shattered by reality. He didn't ask why there was no dinner. He'd already learned that sometimes there wasn't. He didn't ask why his little brother wouldn't stop crying. He just curled up next to his mum, seeking her warmth. Sarah hadn't slept in 2 days. She'd walked all over the city looking for help, food, medicine. Nobody wanted to look at a dirty woman with 2 kids in tow. Nobody wanted to carry her burden. That night, when Noah started convulsing slightly, Sarah knew she couldn't wait any longer. She wrapped him up as well as she could in the blanket, carried Tyler in her other arm, and headed out into the storm. The wind cut across her face, but she didn't feel cold, only fear. She walked for over 40 minutes until she reached the Beverly Hills area, where the lights didn't flicker and the sidewalks gleamed clean. There, among luxury cars and lit-up storefronts, Sarah felt even more invisible, until she saw the coffee shop. It was an upscale place with big windows and soft music. Well-dressed people laughed, drank lattes with foam art, and ate pastries with French names. Sarah stood at the entrance for a moment, hesitating. An employee spotted her. Her expression immediately changed. "You can't be here, ma'am," she said in a clipped tone. "This isn't a place to panhandle." "My son, he's sick," Sarah stammered, her voice barely audible over the storm's noise. "I just need a phone, please." "We don't allow homeless people here." "Leave before I call security," interrupted another younger waiter, just as cold. Some people started turning to look. A couple covered their noses. Another woman made a venomous comment. "Disgusting, they should get these people out of the city." Sarah felt something break inside her. She held Noah tighter. He barely had the strength to cry. Tyler, in her other arm, looked at her with fear. Then, from a table near the window, a man stood up. He wore a dark grey suit, expensive, impeccable. His hair was precisely styled, his shoes gleaming. Everything about him screamed power. But what stood out most were his eyes, dark, serious, and in that moment, confused. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice firm but calm. "Mr. Mitchell," said the employee, nervous. "This woman came in without permission. She's making a mess. She's got her kids with her. Can you imagine?" "And?" The silence was immediate. The man, Marcus Mitchell, owner of one of the country's largest real estate chains, approached Sarah. He looked at her wet clothes, Noah's purple lips, Tyler's bare feet. "Does your son have a fever?" he asked, lowering his voice. Sarah nodded. She couldn't speak. Her whole body was trembling, but it wasn't from the cold. "Let's go," Marcus said simply. "We're going to the hospital." Nobody understood, least of all him. He didn't usually get involved in other people's problems. He didn't usually look anyone in the eye except his business partners. But something about this woman, about this child who could barely breathe, forced him to act. They got into his SUV. Sarah didn't know where to look. She thought maybe it was a trap, that he'd accuse her of kidnapping, that he'd leave her somewhere worse. But when they arrived at the nearest private hospital and the doctors approached, Marcus did something that left her speechless. "He's my son," he said, looking directly at the receptionist. "His name is Noah Mitchell, and she's his mother." Sarah looked at him in horror, but he, unfazed, handed over false identification that he already had ready for reasons even he didn't fully understand. Thanks to that, the doctors moved fast. They admitted Noah immediately. Tyler, exhausted, fell asleep in a hallway chair, leaning against Sarah. She didn't say anything for hours. She felt trapped in a nightmare, or in a dangerous dream. When she finally dared to speak, well past midnight, she did so without lifting her gaze. "Why? Did you do that?" Marcus shrugged. "I couldn't let him die. But you lied. Now they could send you to jail." "I don't care." and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like someone was telling the truth. The sound of medical monitors was constant. Marcus Mitchell sat in a stiff chair next to the bed where Noah slept, hooked up to an IV. The little boy had spent the night on antibiotics and intensive care. The doctor had said that if they'd arrived an hour later, the outcome would have been different, and that phrase, since he'd heard it, wouldn't stop hammering in his head. One more hour and that kid would have died. Marcus, used to signing million-dollar contracts without hesitation, felt for the first time in years deeply vulnerable. What the hell was he doing there? How had he ended up lying in a hospital, saying he was the father of 2 kids he didn't know? What had made him look at that woman in the coffee shop and feel, for a split second, that that dirty, messy, desperate life mattered to him more than anything? He crossed his arms and looked away. He had no answers, only feelings he didn't know how to handle. Sarah sat in a corner, holding Tyler, who slept curled up in her lap. Since they'd arrived at the hospital, she hadn't stopped watching Marcus warily. She'd been grateful for the help, yes, but maintained an almost instinctive emotional distance. She didn't trust anyone, much less someone like him, rich, powerful, unreachable. "What's going to happen when they figure out you lied?" Sarah asked quietly without looking at him. "They're not going to figure it out," he responded, without moving a muscle. "And if they do, what are you going to say?" Marcus turned toward her, and for the first time since they'd met, his eyes weren't cold. They were tired. Human. "I don't know. No idea. But it was worth it." Sarah looked down. It was hard for her to believe him. She'd learned the hard way that everyone has a price, a limit, a hidden agenda. Nobody helps for nothing. Nobody. Outside, the sun began to peek through the clouds, illuminating the hospital windows. Marcus stood up, stretched his stiff shoulders, and approached Tyler. "Can I talk to him?" Sarah nodded doubtfully. Marcus crouched down awkwardly. He wasn't used to interacting with kids. He'd never had children, never wanted them. "Hi, Tyler. Feeling better?" The boy slowly opened his eyes. He looked at him with curiosity. "Are you my new dad?" Marcus went silent. Sarah jumped to her feet, alarmed. "Don't say that, Tyler. He's just helping us." But Marcus smiled, barely. "I'm not your dad, Tyler, but I'm here, okay?" Tyler looked at him a few more seconds and then held out his hand. Marcus took it, and in that moment, something broke inside him. An invisible wall he'd been holding up for years, a wall he'd built since he was a kid, when his father abandoned him and his mother took off after him, leaving him with an aunt who saw him as a burden. Since then, his life had been about control, about power, about success. But this kid, with his small warm hand, was disarming him without saying a single word. That same afternoon, the central offices of Mitchell Corporation were buzzing with concern. Marcus's personal assistant, an efficient young man named Ryan, couldn't reach him. Since the night before, his boss hadn't answered calls or emails. The press was also starting to whisper. "Did you hear?" commented an entertainment reporter on social media. Marcus Mitchell was seen leaving a private hospital with a raggedy woman and 2 kids. New scandal brewing. The rumors didn't take long to escalate. Some investors started calling. The stability of the Mitchell empire depended on its leader's spotless image, and a charitable adventure with a homeless woman wasn't part of the script. Ryan managed to contact him late that evening. "Mr. Mitchell, we need you back at the office. The meeting with the European investors is in less than 48 hours, and the press is starting to ask questions." "Handle it," Marcus responded, without raising his voice. "Don't look for me until further notice." Ryan didn't ask more, but his face reflected something more than concern, fear. He'd never heard him sound so absent. At the hospital, Sarah was receiving encouraging news. Noah was responding to treatment, still weak, but stable. Marcus watched from the doorway, not entering. Something told him he shouldn't invade that moment. Sarah noticed him. "You can come in," she said softly. Marcus entered, uncertain. Sarah looked at him with a mix of gratitude and distrust. She didn't know what to expect from him, didn't know if tomorrow he'd leave, if he'd abandon her like everyone else. "Why are you doing this?" she asked without beating around the bush. What do you get out of it? Marcus sat down. He thought for a long time before responding. I don't have family, I don't have anyone, and I think you guys are the realest thing I've touched in years. Sarah swallowed hard. Tears threatened to come, but she didn't let them. She'd cried too much in her life. Don't use me to feel better about yourself. I'm not playing games, Sarah. Then tell me, what's next? Marcus took a deep breath. I don't know, but I'm not going to leave you alone. That night, Tyler fell asleep hugging Marcus while they watched cartoons in the waiting room. Sarah observed them from the corner of the room, her heart split between fear and a hope she didn't dare accept. Something was changing, but something also threatened to break, and neither of them was ready for what was coming. Marcus's house was so big that the echo of his own footsteps answered him with indifference. High ceilings, cold marble, imposing stained glass. Every corner spoke of success, but also of loneliness. Sarah walked slowly down the hallway, with Tyler clinging to her pants and Noah in her arms. The kids looked at everything with a mix of wonder and fear. They'd never seen a TV that big or a kitchen without stains or roaches. The employees, uniformed and silent, watched them from the corner of their eyes. One of them, the youngest, muttered without hiding it, "Who are these people?" "The boss's new charity case," another responded, not lowering her voice. Sarah felt her chest tighten. She didn't belong in this place, and everyone knew it. "You can stay in the South Wing guest room," Marcus said while signing some papers. "There's everything you need. Clothes, diapers, food. If something's missing, let me know." "Thank you," Sarah responded, in a thread of a voice. Marcus didn't look at her. He was distracted, as if suddenly he didn't know how to keep holding up that decision. The following days were a strange mix of calm and tension. Noah recovered quickly, and Tyler seemed to adapt effortlessly. He played in the yard, ran through the hallways, laughed with the naturalness that only kids who for an instant feel safe have. Sarah, on the other hand, couldn't find her place. She didn't touch anything that wasn't strictly necessary. She ate little, slept with one eye open. She knew this world wasn't hers and feared they'd remind her of it at any moment. One night around 11, she left her room to get water. Passing by Marcus's office, she heard voices. She stopped. "I don't know if I can handle this, Ryan," Marcus was saying, his voice low but loaded with tension. "I'm not a father, I'm not a husband. I don't know how to take care of people. This is getting out of hand." There was a pause. "Why don't you just let them go?" "Because I feel like if I do, I'm going to lose something I didn't know I needed. But I'm also scared. Scared of screwing it up. Of screwing myself up." Sarah slowly backed away, as if the words were pushing her. She closed her eyes. She felt that familiar emptiness in her chest, the one that comes when you understand you're not part of anything. That early morning before dawn, she packed the few things she had. She woke Tyler with a kiss, wrapped Noah in a blanket, and left through the back door without making a sound. The street was cold, the sky still dark. They went back to the construction site. Marcus woke up at 7 in the morning. The house was unusually quiet. He walked to the south wing, knocked on the door. Nothing. He entered. The bed was empty, the blankets folded, not a single trace. "Sarah?" He ran through the whole house, checked every room, looked for the employees. "Where are they?" Nobody could say. Nobody had seen them leave. Marcus felt a pit in his stomach that he'd never known, an absolute emptiness, as if a part of him had been ripped out without warning. "Ryan, I need the security cameras now." They reviewed them. They saw Sarah leave with the kids in her arms, cross the yard, open the side gate, and disappear into the darkness. "Why'd she leave?" Marcus murmured, his voice broken. "Maybe she didn't feel welcome, boss. Or maybe she heard what I said last night." Ryan didn't respond. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, Sarah walked the streets again with the kids. The construction site waited for her like always. Dirty, cold, dangerous. But it was all she knew. Hunger returned soon. The diapers ran out. Noah's fever came back. Sarah cried silently, hugging her children. She blamed herself for believing, even for an instant, that she could have something better. Marcus didn't go to the office that day, or the next. He went out looking for them. He went through hospitals, shelters, corners he'd never set foot in. He drove into neighborhoods where his car stood out like a beacon. Nobody knew anything. Nobody had seen them. He spent 3 days sleeping in his car asking strangers, showing photos of the kids, until a kid on a corner recognized Tyler's picture. I saw him over there in that ugly construction site, with a lady and a baby. Marcus ran without thinking. He found her sitting against a wall with Noah in her arms and Tyler asleep at her side. Her clothes were dirty, her face pale, her eyes swollen from not sleeping. Sarah saw him arrive. She didn't move. She had no strength. "Why did you leave?" "Because I heard you couldn't handle us, and I thought it was just a matter of time before you kicked us out. I'd rather leave before that happened." Marcus knelt in front of her. His hands were shaking. "I didn't know what I was saying. I was scared. But I never wanted you to leave, ever." Sarah closed her eyes. Tears fell without permission. "I'm not a burden. My kids aren't. I know. Forgive me, please forgive me." And for the first time, Marcus Mitchell cried. He cried without fear, without shield, without mask. Sarah looked at him. She didn't respond, but she didn't get up, didn't run. And that was enough. The abandoned construction site was still the same gloomy place as always, but something had changed. The silence that reigned that morning was interrupted by the sound of an engine. A black SUV stopped in front of the lot. Marcus got out before the vehicle was completely off. His steps were quick, determined. The suit he wore was stained with dirt, and his face showed the exhaustion of sleepless nights. He walked through the rubble until he found her, sitting in the same corner where he'd seen her the first time, with Noah asleep in her lap and Tyler hugging her waist. He knelt in front of her, without saying a word, his eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, please." She slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes were red, her expression broken. "What are you doing here?" "I came for you, for the kids. I don't care what it costs anymore. I don't care about what people say or my company or anything else. I just want to have you guys with me." Sarah looked at him for a long time. Then she spoke firmly. "If you want us to come back with you, you're going to have to prove it's not out of guilt or pity or fear of being alone, because my kids aren't a second chance for anyone. If you want to be part of our lives, it'll be with respect, with commitment, and with love." Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Then tell me what I have to do. I'll do whatever it takes." Sarah took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a moment. "First, we have to face the truth." Days later, the 4 of them appeared before Child Protective Services. A hearing had been urgently called after the identity falsification Marcus had used at the hospital was detected. The system wanted answers, and worst of all, there were those looking to use that scandal to publicly discredit Marcus. The room was small but tense. In front of them, a thin social worker with glasses looked at them skeptically. Next to her, a serious judge reviewed documents. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge began, "you deliberately lied to get medical attention for a child who wasn't yours. In addition, you've brought a woman and 2 minors into your home without any legal backing. How do you expect the state to trust you as a father figure?" Marcus stood up. His voice was clear. "I have no excuses. I did what I did because that kid was going to die. And then when I realized it wasn't just a lie anymore. It was a promise. I didn't have family. No reasons. But them. They gave me my life back." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you think that's enough?" Before Marcus could respond, Sarah stood up too. "Excuse me, Your Honor. I want to speak." The judge nodded. All eyes turned to her. Sarah took a breath and began. "I don't have an education. I don't have a house. I don't have anything but my kids. And for years that was enough. But living on the street teaches you a lot of things. To distrust, to harden yourself, to lose faith. When I met Marcus, I thought he was just another rich guy with guilt. I thought he'd use us and then throw us away." "And wasn't he?" interrupted the social worker. Sarah shook her head. "No, he made mistakes, yes. But he also stayed. He looked for us when we left. He cried for my children. He hugged them when no one else did. And even though he has no experience as a father, he has something that few have: the sincere desire to learn, to be better, for them, for us. A deep silence filled the room. "I know he doesn't have my blood," Sarah continued, "but in this world, there are families you choose, and I choose him, because my kids deserve a chance to grow up with dignity, with love, and with someone who won't abandon them when they need it most." The judge looked down. A few seconds passed that seemed eternal. Finally he spoke. "After hearing this testimony, the court grants authorization to Mr. Marcus Mitchell to begin the legal adoption process for minors Noah and Tyler under CPS supervision during the first 6 months. This hearing is adjourned." Sarah couldn't hold back the tears. Marcus squeezed her hand hard. Tyler, not fully understanding, hugged them both tightly. 2 weeks later, the sun shone in Griffith Park. Colourful balloons, children's laughter, and a cake with candles decorated the small picnic Marcus had organised to celebrate Tyler's 4th birthday. Sarah, sitting on a blanket, watched the scene with a new peace. Noah played with a ball while Marcus tried to catch him, pretending clumsiness. Tyler, with a cardboard crown, laughed non-stop. "Dad! Dad! Come see this!" he shouted. And Marcus went. He always went. There were no suits or meetings or phones ringing. Just an improvised family that, against all odds, had found its way to itself. Sarah approached, carrying juice for everyone. Marcus looked at her, smiled and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." She responded without hesitation, "Thank you for finding us." And in the midst of laughter, games and hugs, they understood that love, when it's real, doesn't need blood. It only needs will. And they, finally, had found it.